where are you joining from. So if you're joining from Brussels, which I think is the main location for most people, but if you're joining from somewhere else, feel free to drop that in the chat. And so then we can see who is joining and from which specific area.
Yeah, we can do a quick competition as who's joining us from the furthest field, and we might have some participants from overseas, and that's wonderful. And we're going to get started in a second, so type that into the chat box. And that's also an invitation to everyone that when you have questions, specific comments you want to share with fellow participants and with us, we will bring that into the conversation today and answer those to the degree it fits the schedule. And whatever may not be able to be addressed, then we're going to follow up in some shape or form. So I see some of you are typing, so please put that in the chat box where you're dialing in from, and then we're going to get started because we have a busy 45 minutes ahead that we want to cover a lot of ground on how to use AI for trade associations, and we want to be practical, useful to your organization. So with that, let's get started, and maybe a word of our work. That we have been running AI workshops, webinars, in person, and all format, hybrid conversations and workshops on how to use AI in a very practical, tangible manner. This is to help organizations of all sorts. We've worked with many trade associations, among other corporations, European Commission, pharma companies, all sorts, but we put here a few that we have run workshops for, from Euroelectric, Eurotex, Holtrek, Spirits Europe, and countless others. And we've done that in multiple countries. So that's the background we come from, and we try to integrate the best practices and ideas into everything we do. Jacques, you want to present a little bit the background?
Absolutely. So this is the 3 days of AI. It's the 3 days that we've organized, or we're organizing at the moment. With the first session we had 2 days ago for pharma and life sciences. Today it's for trade associations. So we'll share some examples of ideas and use cases that we have shared with trade associations, and to give you a better sense of how you can use AI in your work. And today's agenda is going to be very quick, very packed. And we're going to focus on adopting the right AI mindset. So going beyond asking simple questions to the AI tools you have and see what are the use cases you can have. And we're also going to share some ideas for advanced prompting. So if you have questions on how to prompt, how to get better results, then we're going to share some ideas with you to help you get better answers. And then we'll have a Q&A session. But if you have any questions during the conversation here, feel free to use the chat. And this will help us see what your questions are. As a disclaimer, keep in mind that the AI answers that we have in these examples may contain inaccuracies. We also are very tool agnostic, which means that we might be using Perplexity, we might be using ChatGPT for certain things, but it's really how you use these tools and not so much the tools that you use more that really matter here. Again, any questions, feel free to address them in the chat, and all the slides will be shared after the session. So if we're going a little bit too quickly, don't worry, you'll have some time to check the slides afterwards. And again, this is a fast-paced 45 minutes, so let's make sure we knock down every idea we have in stock.
Yeah, and just maybe one additional point about the inaccuracies. That's something we're going to address of what you can actually do on your end when AI hallucinates or comes up with inaccurate information. The inaccuracy here refers to the fact that we obviously use public sources and public information. But when it comes to your association, your organization, you do have access to far more information that we could possibly have from the outside. And therefore, you can get much more nuanced responses and much more helpful input from the AI with the overlay of public and internal information while using your trusted internal tool. So maybe the very first question, and to, again, encourage you to put that into the chat box to ask you what you use AI for. So maybe share 1 or 2 use cases, something that you do regularly or occasionally, leveraging, harnessing the power of AI. So please put that into the chat box. What are some of the use cases that AI helps your work? I can see that some are coming in: research, summary of documents, creating personas of members to help you with, tailor comms messages. That's a very interesting one from Lydia. Okay, summarize document, bouncing off ideas, analyze regulatory documents and studies, draft position papers, accurate translation. Wonderful. So that's really helpful, and not only for us, but perhaps for others to see and already give you some ideas what you can use AI for besides the task that you may already be doing.
So we wanted to quickly start with scenarios. So we believe that a great way to get good answers from AI systems is to think about a scenario. So for example, we were thinking about how can a trade association get more information on what their audience think about them, right? So we would create a prompt like this one. It's a quiet Thursday night in a Brussels bar. A European Commission official and a solar developer are talking about the trade association Solar Power Europe. What surprising strength do they both agree Solar Power Europe has? Something the public affairs team would never hear in a meeting, but should. So this is what we mean by creating a scenario. You can simply ask a question as you're thinking about what an audience might think about a trade association. And this is the result that the AI tool here, its Perplexity, has come up with. So Solar Power Europe's standout strength is its rock-solid data and market forecasts. This quiet power shines in their outlooks because they're seen as objective gold standards, not just lobby spin. So when you're thinking about using AI to get better information or to collect insights about your audience, it's a really great way to do so by simply asking a question, creating a scenario. For example, this was the bar. To surface all these insights that then you can use in your advocacy or in your work just altogether.
Now, one aspect that we really like to emphasize when we talk about AI, and especially for public affairs, member relations, any other task that your association or the one you're managing is engaged in, is it really the focus on the prompting, or perhaps a more ambitious goal is to improve your thinking? And we are firm believers that the latter is a much bigger value add, because certainly the prompting is the how, but the improving the thinking is what we use AI for and how it can benefit the quality of the work that we do.
So with AI, we think that we can solve more complex problems because we can gather in more information, we can summarize documents, we can go through a lot of data to solve a problem, which is potentially supporting our members more specifically or more effectively, or it's writing better copy for documents and things like that. But to do so, we need to ask deeper questions. So when I personally started using AI, I asked what I thought were very deep questions, like, what am I doing with my life? And it seems like it's a very deep and specific question. Existential, for sure. It seems very deep, very specific, but it's not really the case, because the AI tools would go in many different directions to figure out what I was trying to achieve, right? But when I understood that I needed to be more specific, like with this example here, based on everything you know about me, imagine what my next 5 years could look like with a list of impressive accomplishments, and then once done, give me a plan for how to get there. It's only when I started being more specific that I got very, very good answers from these AI tools. So similarly, if you have something you want an answer, or if you have a question that needs to be answered, like summarize the European Commission's pesticide strategy, which seems to be a very deep question, but is not very specific, then it's usually better to go for something that would read along the lines of read this specific PDF carefully. So here we're actually submitting or uploading a document for the AI to process, and then generate a practical, thorough summary for a regulatory perspective in bullet points. So we're actually asking something specific that we want from this specific document. And then research CropLife's Europe member portfolio and top issues. So we're asking to research something to then cross-check the policy priorities with the summary that it generated from the document. And then highlight the 5 best strategic angles for industry advocacy. So you see that through these 2 examples, you have something that is really broad and not very specific to something that has a lot more weight, a lot more context, a lot more reference points for the AI to come up with a much, much more detailed answer.
And maybe one point to add here, some nuances, but those are helpful, very practical tips is we feed the PDF in. We don't necessarily give the link to the website because we want to be more targeted and ensure that the tool can read the entire document and not necessarily because of the formatting of a web page might miss certain things. And whatever the practical thorough summary, well, that's up to the judgment of the AI. But if I want to be more deliberate, I can give more guidance as to what practical means for my particular job profile or the task that I want to resolve. And then again, research crop life, well, it would search those pages, but I can hand feed that, or I can create first a research document and then feed that into the AI, so it's going to produce better results. So these are, when am I relying on the tool to perform something, and when am I hand feeding it or spoon feeding it with a more deliberate aim of what I want to get out of it. So maybe in that vein, the first use case we want to present is researching policy developments, something that certainly most, if not all of you, do on a regular basis. And a helpful way is to provide more context. So we would take, for the sake of example, a US association called Pharma, and say, we give a role, you're a detail-oriented healthcare policy researcher, because we might say you are a reimbursement pricing strategist, or you are a legal expert, or you are a marketing associate who needs to look at different things from the very same source. And then identify 3 US policy trends likely to affect the pharma industry over the next couple of years. So we want to research the unknown and at least get some idea for horizon scanning and scenario planning. And for each of these, describe the change and then rate its likelihood and impact. So we not only perform a task with AI and search it, but we want to get a bit more clarity that the AI explains why it matters for the association. So it's not just the information, but we're trying to get more context and a bit more insight as to the reasoning behind it, and then turn that into some helpful chart with a table with star ratings, and then we get something like this. Now, each tool might provide the output differently. If it's Copilot, the formatting might be something different, or if it's Mistral, the French AI tool, that again might do something different. But again, the point here is not the tool itself, but the kind of things we want to use this for, and the output that will be helpful for our specific task and the specific thing. And then we can turn that into something more visual. This is a Perplexity screenshot, but again, ChatGPT and other tools are increasingly good at creating those visuals. And again, we're not talking image generation, but something of a diagram with the likelihood against impact. And then we would get something along these lines with color codes and something. And again, it's based on a pretty straightforward one-shot prompt. If I were to do this more specifically or push it a little further, I would not put everything in a single first prompt, but segment it and do a step-by-step more process-driven approach, so the result will be better. So I could turn first into an Excel sheet with weighing, and then convert that Excel sheet into a helpful chart of the kind that you see on the screen.
And just something to add here is that most people think that we can use AI to just get text or text answers, and although this is the case, I think it's a great way to think about the different formats you want these answers to be created. So if it's text, if it's a table, if it's a graph, these AI tools are really good at creating new formats. So you can really be creative with the format you want. The second use case is to also think about the documents you have to draft. And the idea is to always ask for a critical review. So instead of asking, how can I improve this document? You can simply ask something like, what is going wrong, or what is wrong with the document, and take it from there to improve then your writing. So here we're using the tool called Notebook LM. It's a free Google tool. And I've uploaded here an analysis or a report from FPA, which is the European Federation for Pharmaceutical Industries and Companies. And so here we've uploaded a report to get a better sense of what the report is about, to have a little bit of a summary. So this tool is really good for summarizing or analyzing documents, especially long ones. So if you have multiple documents, you can easily upload them and get answers to your questions. And on the next slide, I've asked a more specific question about the document, saying, act like a detail-oriented and critical policy manager at FPA. and take your time to carefully review this report. And then I've asked, instead of asking questions on how to improve it, I've asked questions about the flaws that the AI tool can find in the document. So identify any flaws, factual inaccuracies, outdated data, logical gaps. And then at the end, once you're done doing this critical review, outline 3 actionable recommendations to improve this report. And this is the power of AI, because you can obviously ask questions to improve your document, and it's always going to try to please you. But if you ask something on the other side and something that is more critical, then it's going to come with a critique of this specific document. So on the next slide, you'll see.
Just to jump in here, I see some
Yes.
questions coming in. It's what's the name of the tool? That's Notebook LM. LM as in language model. But if you just Google Notebook LM, you will find that it's a Google Notebook LM. You need a Google account, Gmail account to log in, but it's a freemium tool, free for a certain limit, and it does the job. Back to you, Jacques.
Yes, and on the next slide, you'll see the answer. So it's going to do a critical review, identify the flaws, the gaps, the things you might have missed in the framing of the document. So it's a great way for you to double check that the document is ready to go before publishing it or before sharing it with your team. And I think there's another part with the recommendations. Yes.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
It's always great to also ask for recommendations. So that you can then tweak the documents, provide some updates. Maybe there's a stat that is off or outdated. So it's really good to go through this exercise to proofread some of the documents you might have internally.
And maybe just one thing to highlight from here, when Jacques gave that prompt, he said, well, carefully review this report. If you see the top, that's the second line from the top. And that might sound a little strange to tell the AI. You don't tell your Excel sheet to carefully calculate this formula. But with AI, given that is this semi-intelligent, or well, very intelligent in some sense, but it's not works by a very different logic than most programs or software we have known. When I say carefully review, that means prioritize depth and accuracy over speed, because the default typically tends to be speed. But when I say carefully review or take your time and make a detailed review, then it's going to take an extra couple of seconds and look a little deeper and not just pick up the top line findings. And then the question might arise, like, what can you do when AI answers seem wrong, or they are missing details, or something seems off, or you are you're a, let's say, a conscientious professional who really wants to be sure that you're not signing off on something that may not be fully accurate and fact-based. Well, you can challenge your AI tool. You can say, well, explain in detail how you came up with these results and share your main blind spots. And again, that might seem a little strange to tell the machine to say, well, whatever answer you came up with, tell me how you might be wrong or what you may have overlooked. But that tends to be a helpful check or helpful pushback. You can obviously do this in the very first prompt. You can say, well, I want to do a research, or I want to understand a certain summary or certain issue, but then tell me the reasoning. How did you get to the results, and why did you pick the results that you did? And here it would say, well, I checked the expiration date of the data, or I scrutinized the countries at a glance framework, or I looked at where the report ignores the payer's perspective, right? Like, so it does give a little peek into its way of thinking. Now, again, AI being a strange beast, where sometimes it justifies what it has already done and not necessarily honestly reveals what it did. So if we ask it as a second question, it may justify it. If we ask it in the initial prompt, it may be a little more accurate and honest as to why it came to the results it did. But it's helpful to push it back and challenge it. Say, and I would say, well, I had blind spots, and these are the ones where I looked at the broader healthcare ecosystem, or my review may have missed regional variations. And these biases or blind spots are not necessarily of any political nature. These are not political biases. It's often because the instruction we give may not be so deep or detailed or sophisticated. So it goes with the most likely scenario. It's a probability machine. So if you don't give information about something, it's going to go with the most probable method or the most probable assumptions. Now, if I were to run this report purely for Romania or purely for Portugal, well, I need to explicitly say that, because otherwise it's not going to pick up that particular focus. Or if I want to look at a particular sector or industry, I need to be explicit about it.
So we also want to mention that there's 3 types of data that you might be using when you're trying to get answers from AI systems, right? So the first one is usually the public data. So you can freely use this data. It's data that we all have access to. So using public information is completely free, and it's an easy way for you to get simple results. You should be a little bit more cautious about internal data. Obviously, if it's data that your association might want to protect. So you should really use appropriate tools and not disclose any sensitive information when you're using these tools. And then there's the confidential data, which you should never input into any tool unless you fully anonymize and make sure that you're switching on or switching off the settings in your tool to make sure that the tool is not being trained using that specific data. So whenever you're using these AI tools, it's always great to think about how you classify your data, to think, is it public data that we can use? Is it more internal data that we should be very cautious in using? Or is it confidential data that we should protect at all costs?
And maybe just one comment on there, because the large corporations, and I would even include European Commission and agencies there, they tend to have their own internal tool. So their trusted internal tool with the necessary safeguards. It doesn't feed data back into the overall system. But many associations tend not to have that yet, or may not have thought about it, and it tends to be quite sporadic as to what the staff uses and what settings they have. So we would encourage you to look into that, and we're happy to give our perspective at another point, not necessarily today's conversation, but that is something, a reflection worth having, to say, okay, what policies we have in place, what tool do we give staff access to, and what safeguards are put in place for data protection and privacy. And in that realm, I tried to visualize that, where you do have your trusted corporate tool, and I use the word corporate in a broad sense, and be that an NGO, be that any kind of association you are working with. But that's kind of your hub. That's the center into which you can bring in internal documents and confidential data sets, and also a lot of external search, because many organizations who have their internal tool, they might say, well, I can only use it and nothing else. Well, chances are you can do a public search and a research document that you pull into your internal tool. So you turn a research into a PDF, you feed that into your internal tool, and use sensitive data that your internal tool has access to. So you have best of both worlds, where you overlay external information with the sensitive one. And I see there's a question coming in, how do you fully anonymize Copilot? It's, well, certain things that are very easy to do just in the general settings, where you turn off that the system, well, they say these companies are really smart. The way they formulate it often is help the model improve for everyone. And that basically means your data can be used to train the model. And again, it's not necessarily directly available, like you upload it to the internet and Google can find it, but still, that's something you immediately want to turn it off, even if you use it privately or use it as a company or as an association. That's the minimum. And then certain data handling practices can be communicated, where you just don't upload personally sensitive data. You can put placeholders there, or you describe a situation instead of fully uploading the background document about it. It all depends on the level of sensitivity that you feed into the tool. But as a software system, you want to do the absolute minimum safeguards, that it doesn't train on your data, doesn't use it for any purposes that you would not be happy with. And then moving on as to what you use or what you can use AI for, we came up with this thought experiment of the Maslow pyramid, and repurposed for AI use. the fun and entertainment, a little bit the bar example we kicked it off with is somewhat in that realm, funny prompts and games and images and whatnot. But from a business, from a policy, from an advocacy perspective, well, simple task execution, all of you are certainly doing it. We saw that in the chat when you mentioned proofreading, summarization, and similar tasks. Where we would encourage you to go towards is the workflow optimization and the advanced problem solving, where you take stakeholder inputs. Let's say, here's the position paper from 5 different stakeholders. Let's feed them into, say, Notebook LM or Copilot for that matter, and say, well, I want a helpful chart that compares where these stakeholders agree on, what is it that they disagree on, and what is the message that we could approach them with so all of them would likely buy into it. That is more than simply executing a certain task. And the advanced problem solving bit is creating a better advocacy plan, creating a communication outreach plan, or you're working with your members and to say, okay, here's the data about member engagement or drop-offs, and let's analyze it and come up with a better strategy to keep members happy, or which members were the most engaged and the least, and what are some good outreach or communication strategies we can apply to keep them as happy members, right? So again, you are overlaying information and data, and you're looking it to solve more difficult problems. And then there are quite a few custom applications. Many of you are certainly using note takers. Certain caveats apply with non-compete clauses and antitrust clauses that may affect it, or internal tools, or regulatory monitoring tools, or social monitoring and the like. And one tool I wanted to showcase, we just launched it, called Rhetora.ai. Rhetora is to use to help you with better persuasion, with better messaging. You can find personas and groups like Gen Z or free market conservatives or environmental activists, and we're going to be adding many more. You can take a press release or any kind of document, use communication frameworks, and it's going to help you visualize and get an immediate feedback like you would from a focus group or market research to say, how would they react to your message? And not just the reaction, but proactive suggestions as to how to change it, how to frame it differently. And you can chat, and quite soon you will even be able to have voice conversations with those virtual personas. And we're planning on adding members of the European Parliament or other public figures, so you can at least anticipate how to present your message in a way that works better for them. So that is something or in beta, so we're testing it and getting feedback. So if you want to sign up on Rhetora, you're more than welcome, and you can try it for free. So moving on to high-level meetings, Jacques, you probably want to speak about this.
Absolutely. I think high-level meetings, or at least preparing them, is also something you might have on your to-do list as an association. So here again, another prompt just to give you an idea. So the idea is to prepare for an annual meeting for the European Cancer Leagues. And so the idea is to run a quick research on key members' views on AI ethics and cancer data sharing, and then to craft 3 persuasive arguments to convince these members to agree on a joint EU position. And again, here, as you can see, we broke things down into specific parts in this prompt. And at the end, we added the Cialdini's principles of persuasion. So this is just to say that whenever you have a framework, a book, a principle from a movie or from anything else, you can simply reference that specific principle to then have a much more persuasive argument when you're preparing a meeting. So it's going to come up with 3 key arguments for the members, with 1 core idea, 1 persuasion trick, which is linked to the persuasion principles that we mentioned, and as well a pushback fix. So whenever you're preparing for a meeting, it's always great to think about some recommendations for pushback, some counter arguments, or anything like that. And so it's always going to depend on the prompt to make sure that we have all these elements.
And in the same vein, we can also use AI for deep insights and develop data storytelling. So you as associations certainly have access to enormous amount of data from the members, from the market, from dedicated research. So we took, as an example, Euroelectric. They have a public-facing data page with all sorts of sheets and statistics linked to the energy market, electricity, and the like. So I picked one. I took, okay, cross-border flows, the monthly breakdown, for a particular period from 2024 2026, and I fed that into Claude. Claude is a really good AI tool. It's now really catching up with ChatGPT, sometimes even surpassing it in its capabilities. And again, we're just demonstrating it to showcase a wide variety of tools. So I fed that Excel sheet in, and I said, carefully analyze the data set. And as a senior business analyst, give me 5 non-obvious yet tremendously useful insights. And again, just the emphasis is on the wording, where I said non-obvious. I don't want to focus on something that is entirely clear just by looking at the numbers. And things that are of interest to you policymakers. And not only that, but we looked at it from a narrative perspective. So if you are in a comms role, if you are in a data analytics role, this can be interesting to understand the data, but then turn that into something that resonates with the target audience, or explain it to a particular kind of audience in a narrative setting. And here it pulled up these ideas from the data, and it says, okay, here are the conclusions I can draw, and turn that into a narrative that can be used in some setting.
And what I also wanted to add here is that the language will really be key in your prompts, right? So by saying non-obvious, unconventional, or saying things like reading between the lines, or something that is not said or unsaid in the text, is always going to provide you with answers that are not generic. Another use case is to optimize member support. So here is the idea is to obviously increase the value that you're providing to your members and as an association. So here we're focusing on the European Heat Pump Association, preparing a strategy for their members. And so identify the concrete support that the association currently gives members, and compare it with what others in the space or other bigger associations are doing for their members. So Wind Europe and Euroelectric, for example. And then once done, again, we're asking for 3 actionable recommendations to optimize member support. So it's all about doing some research on what you are doing some research on what others are doing, and then comparing the two in a table format. And here you have basically all the different categories, or all the different tasks or activities, and then the comparison for the other associations. And after that, you also have the recommendations to think about, right? And you are the expert in the room. You're the people who know if this is going to work, if this might not work. So some ideas might seem maybe a little bit generic, or some ideas might seem not that creative or impossible to be done. But it's up to you then to process the information and see if we can actually implement this as a team.
And just to reinforce that final point, we're not necessarily looking, and we don't have the expectation to have 10 ideas and all 10 will be amazing and we're going to implement that. And not even 7 need to be great. 7 may be something you're already doing or you don't think it's realistic. 2 are something that you had already thought about. But then you have one idea that changes everything. So as long as the use of the AI is not for very concrete, specific information retrieval, but more on the creative side of things, well, then there's a lot to interact with, and great ideas can come from many directions. And in that vein, again, most of you, or if not all of you, being in associations or some form of organization where members are actively engaging with the secretariat, and you are connecting with their questions and their queries. There are countless tools out there. I just showcased one of them, but there are really many others where you can integrate that as an perhaps members-only chat service. And the interesting thing is, these are really smart. These are not the chat bots of the past where you would ask something and say, well, I have no idea, or give you a completely wrong information. But you can feed any number of data sources, any kind of policy documents or best practices or codes of conduct or legal frameworks, and then members can engage with that. Now, with the clear disclaimer that this is a bot-generated answer and it might contain inaccuracies, so it needs to be properly configured and tested to be helpful. But this sort of chatbots and very smart chatbots based on your carefully handcrafted background information can really be a great service. And you can also create a custom tool for operations. So the term vibe coding is the official term there, but there are quite a few tools out there with which you can generate helpful tools for your association or for the members or for business operations that are unique to your needs and service your needs. And just for the sake of example, I took here one in HR, and if let's say you're about to hire new staff, and you want to parse the incoming CVs, resumes for American speakers, and see what, just to have a short list of applicants. And I use the tool Replit, but there are quite a few others of the same kind, where basically with a very sophisticated prompt, you can tell the tool what you want to build, and then it builds it. So this is what the tool built with a single prompt. This is like a candidate tracking tool for new hires. I said, okay, I need an evaluation with different stars. I want to be able to add private notes about that particular candidate. And then I want to have a short list. I can save the evaluation. Now, again, this is just placeholders, but this was already created as a sample that you can fine tune and plug into certain database or your office tools or others, and then you can deploy it internally. And again, this could be even a marketing dashboard, or it could be for HR, or it could be for member engagement tracking. So there could be multiple ways of using this. And again, it's a tool called Replit, and there's more to say about it, but I just wanted to highlight it as an idea. And as we're coming to the end of our fast-paced, yet hopefully practical and helpful workshop, just wanted to showcase this page from the Influence Builders website, our website, where we did a curated list of helpful tools. Some of it we mentioned, some we haven't. So Gamma, Beautiful AI, they are pretty good at creating presentations and slide decks. Now, increasingly, Copilot is now plugged into PowerPoint, so that does similar things with mixed results, at least at this point, but the tools are quickly gaining traction. Or 11 Labs, which is a voice and audio generation tool, so it can read out a document, but it can go beyond. Similarly to Notebook LM, it can generate audio summaries of documents. So let's say the commission comes up with a policy document that you need to have a somewhat not super detailed, but still some understanding of it, and you can generate 30, 40, 50-minute audio summary of it when you are commuting or walking the dog. So again, there are countless tools and uses, but just wanted to highlight some of that on the screen. And then takeaways, Jacques.
Absolutely. So in terms of takeaways, we really want to focus on providing more context in your prompts. So thinking about the format, the role that the AI should take, also your goal, thinking about the problem you're trying to solve. The second point is obviously avoiding using personal data. So reminding ourselves that, are we using public information, internal information, or confidential information? Asking deeper questions will lead to much better answers. So I think there was a question in the chat asking about, is there a tool that does everything? Obviously, a lot of tools can do a lot of different things, and some of them are more specialized, but it's really key that you focus on asking deeper questions. This is sort of the main takeaway from this conversation today. Also, using AI as a thinking partner, so not thinking I'm just going to ask a question and then assess if the result is good, but then asking follow-up questions. Questions like, what would be a fair counter-argument? Where did you find this information? How can I find out more? What would be a result, or what would be a different way of viewing the specific problem, for example, right? So thinking about asking follow-up questions and having a real conversation. Another point is to, instead of giving instructions, is to state your problem and goals. So as an association, we're really struggling to bring people together on this topic. What do you think would be the root cause of this issue? And then go from there to understand what is the problem you're actually facing before actually giving instructions to an AI system. And again, keep experimenting using different tools. We've shared a list of tools that you can use. Maybe there's different results you can get from these tools. And based on what we've seen in the chat, most of you are looking at issues or things you want to improve in terms of writing. So there's going to be different tools that are much better at writing, and sometimes even your prompt and your settings, the way you set things up, is going to affect exactly the results you're getting from these tools. So again, we'd like to thank you for the session today. It was a great opportunity for us to share what we've been doing, but it's also a great opportunity for us to invite you to potentially book a workshop for your team. Maybe there's things you want to go a little bit deeper into and see how we can have specific examples to your team, how we can customize some use cases to what you're facing as a team. So to align on AI best practices, there's some rules that obviously we need to follow when it comes to AI in terms of privacy, accuracy, bias. Also exploring some use cases. So we've worked with many different associations, and these use cases can help you elevate your game or elevate your understanding of how to use AI in your work. Again, if you have any more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'd be happy to process them and address them in the few minutes that are remaining.
Yeah, so I see there is one question coming in that says, many of these tools seem to require background information to give better outputs. And how do you advise to develop this background information from scratch? And that's a very helpful question, because we briefly mentioned the importance of the context. Many people talk about prompt engineering and optimizing your prompt, which is not to say it's not important. It's very important in getting the right output and using the right terms and words. What might be even more important is providing the right context. Context means background document, description of the situation. What do you need that particular output for? If I say, well, help me draft a 2-minute speech for a stakeholder consultation, yeah, but there are so many variables that would still be important to provide the context. And one quick trick is to tell the AI, ask me 5 questions before you give me the answer. And it will ask you 5 questions. It's okay. Who is the audience of the speech? What message do you really want to emphasize? What style do you want to adopt? Who are you in that situation? Are you a consultant? Are you a policy expert? Or are you the Secretary General of the trade association? Right? Like, those are variables which may not come immediately top of mind to input into the tool or upload as a contextual document. But the more robust you have that, the better the output will be. And as always, it's a cost-benefit thing, where if it's worth your time because it's an important thing to do, it's an important task to accomplish, you probably will spend more time. If it's about proofreading, it's not worth adding any more words than absolutely necessary. And I see that some of you are asking for the deck. Certainly, we'll share the slide deck with you with the recording of this webinar. And we are obviously available for follow-up questions or anything that you'd like to discuss in this reel. Other questions, we'll be happy to answer in the remaining 1.5 minutes.
I think there might have been a question in the beginning. Do the associations you work for already have an internal, external policy document or statement on AI?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't think it's a standard for most associations to have a policy, internal and external. Some of them are still asking themselves if they should be transparent with their audience on whether they're using AI or not. So I think it's more of a case-by-case scenario. If it's something you need to put in stone to make sure that everybody understands that you're using AI and how you're using it, then we would encourage you to do so. But I don't think it's a standard for now in most associations we work with.
That's correct. That's my experience as well, where associations are looking at it, but it seems to be quite fragmented as to how their staff is using AI. And I think that's a risk, or that's a risk from a data protection perspective. That's a risk from a consistency perspective, because they might use different AI with different settings. So I know it's also a risk of how the data is managed, or how sensitive documents are managed. So yeah, that is probably a key thing. And I don't think it's extremely complicated by any means, but it's a management question, something that is worthy of being addressed by those who lead the association or lead the organization to think about and put some policies or at least some guidelines in place. Good. I think with that, okay, here's another one. For a larger project, what's the best way to structure the background information we provide to an AI tool? How can we ensure we include the most relevant details without overwhelming it? So Well, you can do certain steps. If you're working with large documents, you can very easily cut that into pieces as a PDF and work in batches, or you can create summaries per batch, per piece, and then use with the extracted summary, with the extract secondary information from it. So and then basically you shrink the document in so many ways. So that could be one way. Notebook LM is very good at working with large documents, and I mean 100-page, 200-page documents. So that's another method. I mean, off the top of my head, these are the two approaches I would look at without knowing further details about the particular challenge to solve. Thank you so much for being here. We'll be sharing the slides with the recording as before. Happy to be of use, of service if you have follow-up questions. Thanks for being here. Feel free to share whatever you receive from us to share it with others who might be interested. And to be continued.
Thank you. Thank you for joining, and have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.